Hey, good morning. Yes, it is. It's Sunday, girls. Sunday, February 4th. So I thought we always talk about the Sunday sermon, but today we're going to talk about being able to laugh at yourself and understanding that you're not perfect and that you can laugh at some of the crazy crap that you and I have done, over the years. Even if you're younger, hang tight. Alright, so what's Eric talking about this morning, huh? It's understanding that you're not perfect, alright? We all know what a perfectionist is, right? It's somebody that is trying to achieve greatness and having something perfect. But if you know anybody that's a perfectionist, you know that it's never perfect. They can never get to that level. But yet they strive and they strive and they strive and they get aggravated. They don't understand why they can't have something become perfect. Now here's the catcher. Perfect in their eyes. Now to you and I, we may look at it and say, my God, you can't get any better than that. And we see it as being perfect. But in that person's eyes, as a perfectionist, they can never achieve it. And that's what today's about, is learning to recognize that we're not perfect. And how laughing at yourself shows that you understand that. And that it kind of raises your status too, because someone that has the ability to make a mistake, to show imperfection, and then to laugh at it, which will bring you up here in most people's eyes, status-wise. It reminds me of, my wife and I, we were first married. She's my second wife. And we were in our mid-40s. And I was sitting in my recliner in the living room, and my wife was sitting on the couch recliner reading a book. She had her glasses on. And I started feeling like I was having a heart attack, okay? My in-laws used to love this. But finally it got to where she could see I was holding my chest in my arm, And she's a registered nurse. And she said, "What's going on, babe?" I said, "I don't want to scare you, but I think I'm having a heart attack." So she came over, took my pulse, and took one step back, and then body slammed me. Physically body slammed me. And when she did that, I have never farted so loud in so long in my life. Now, the chest pain went away. And as my wife explained, she was doing a medical procedure called letting the gas out. Thus, it causes pressure on the backside of the heart, and it can mimic that of a heart attack. I remember it being told by my wife at Christmas, that Christmas downstay with her parents and sisters and aunt, and they were all rolling at this new medical procedure. And I had a choice at that point, guys. I either could laugh at myself or I could get upset that people are laughing at me. See, you have two choices. Mine went with laughing at me. I mean, because it was a real life thing. It did happen. And it was funny. And that says a lot to the people that are around you, that if you can laugh at yourself, even if you are the brunt of the joke. I've never felt like I was perfect. I never felt like I had to achieve perfection. But we need to laugh at ourselves. We need to just enjoy it. As asinine as, my life would be a living comical, comedian skit show. When I was growing up, when I was young, and now that I'm old, but I can remember another time that it came into play. See, I worked as an EMT for the local volunteer rescue squad for over 20 years. And I went on a lot of calls. And I could spend all day telling you about certain calls that were hilarious. But the one, his name was John. And I had met him when we worked security. He worked there part-time. Didn't last long. But he was kind of like a hypochondriac. He constantly thought something terrible was going to happen to him, right? And he had called 911 numerous times and to pick him up at his residence because he thought he was having a heart attack or this or that, to the point where certain ones were unwilling to answer the call. They had grown tired of John wasting their time because, again, you're a volunteer, right? So I'm sitting there one evening at the house, and I've got my pager that goes off with the tones, and then it comes across my pager, and I have a handheld walkie-talkie thing that I can talk with Central Dispatch, and I can talk with other members of the EMT group and the firefighters. And I was the furthest out, okay? Far enough out so that I carried in my truck a jump bag. And most of the time, instead of going all the way down to the department where the ambulance was, I would meet them on scene. I would go directly to where the problem was. Person having a heart attack, I'd hop in my truck, head right for their place. I had the oxygen on board, I had meds, I had, basically a jump pack, a big old duffel bag that I could set up and at least start prepping the patient for the ride. But we get this call, comes across my pager, that driver and EMT is needed at the fire hall. So I got on the radio. I said, Central Dispatch, this is 09. What's going on at the fire hall? And she responded back, yes, that the patient is in the ambulance right now waiting for you. And I'm thinking, in the ambulance waiting for me. Now the other guys picked up on this, and my wife said, it's got to be John. So I hop in my truck and I drive all the way down to the station. And the only other person that would show up was a guy that he could drive. He was a driver. He wasn't an EMT. And by then, John had gotten out of the ambulance and was sitting in a chair behind the ambulance in the fire hall building. So I went down and I said, John, what's going on? He said, I think I'm having a heart attack. Okay. Why do you think you're having a heart attack? Are you any chest pains? He said, yeah. He said, I'm having terrible chest pains. And my arm feels like it's going numb. So, trying to figure out, because he's heavy. I mean, the boy loves to eat. I'm trying to think, well, how is the driver, which is skinny as a rail, and me going to get John into the ambulance? So I said, John, can you help us get into the ambulance? And he said, sure. Hops up out of his chair, goes up the steps into the ambulance, and lays down on the gurney. It doesn't end there, folks. So I took his vitals, hooked up the EKG machine on him, told the driver, let's roll. Gotta go to the closest hospital, which was 12 miles away, 13 miles away. No lights and sirens. John wanted lights and sirens. But I said, no lights and sirens. Just, head that direction. So I'm looking at the EKGs, looking at his vitals, and everything looks good. His blood pressure hasn't dropped or hasn't elevated. The rhythm on his heart looks great. So I said, what'd you have to eat tonight, John? And he said that, well, it was like 8 hot dogs with sauerkraut. 8 hot dogs, folks, and sauerkraut. So thank God that I had prior information on how to fix this issue, that, maneuver that my wife had done on me years ago. So I stood up and I body slammed him. Sure enough. There was a loud exchange of gas. And the problem is I don't know if you guys have ever been inside of an ambulance, but it's like a box in the back with a cab in the front. And the guy in front can either close the door or open it. Because if you had what we liked to have was 2 EMTs in the back and 2 up front to help lift, right? And the third guy could come through the door if I needed help, with an IV or what have you. But the smell, folks, the smell. And that little skinny ass driver had the gall to shut the door and lock it to the cab. So I had no place to go. I was confined in that box until we backed into the hospital emergency room. And they just about gagged when the doors flung open to wheel him in. True story. True story. I told you my life is a comical skit. I remember this one time. I was growing up. And of course, I told you in prior videos, I lived with my grandparents. And during the spring and summer, we used to have an occasional skunk come by us and take up residence under the porch. that was an open porch concept in the house. But it would burrow its way underneath, and so you didn't want to have any scraps out or garbage, stuff like that, because the skunks would get into it. But the thing was, is my grandfather had read somewhere, or someone had told him, that if you grab a skunk by the tail and you hold it up high, that it can't spray you as long as you have the hind feet off the ground. Real true story. And I was just starting to become a trapper. I was the young wilderness outfitter. I was into hunting, fishing, trapping, you name it. And I think I was around 13 at the time. Now, I had never read or saw where if you grabbed a skunk by the tail and got its hind feet off the ground, that it couldn't spray. I'd never heard such a thing. But my grandfather was full of wisdom, right? So we set out a plan to trap this skunk because he was taking up residence underneath the porch. And if we because we had 2 dogs, if we let the dogs out, if any of them got close to it, it would kind of just give a little squirt. But the smell lingered for hours, and it permeated the house, and Grandma hated it. So what we decided to do was to take a stovepipe and have it so it was blocked off at one end, okay? And we put tuna fish at the far end of the blocked off end in that stovepipe. And, previously I had been able to sit on the porch and watch the skunk walk right down and underneath the porch in the evening hours. So we thought this would work. So we set the stovepipe with the tuna fish in it. And sure enough, as I watched, here come that skunk. And it was a big skunk. It wasn't a little skunk. It was a big skunk. But the thing with skunks is, even as big as they are, they can fit through a hole like this. They just kind of shimmy their body. But we went ahead, and once I see him going into the stovepipe, I hollered to Grant. He's in the pipe. So my Grant come out, and he was 6'4", and he had a limp from a car accident he'd been involved in years before. So he kind of limped along as he was coming out through. And I jumped over the railing because it wasn't a screened-in porch. I just jumped over the railing, and I tipped that stovepipe upwards so that it forced him down in, right? And things were going good up to that point. And that's when Grant decided that he would try lifting the skunk out of the stovepipe to see if it could really spray. Now, most reasonable people would have taken the stovepipe and banged the hell out of it, made a lot of noise, and then released it over the embankment. That way it would stay away from our place, right? Because it didn't want to get caught in the stovepipe again. So the last thing I remember was I was holding the stovepipe, and my grandfather reached down in and grabbed that skunk by the tail. And he brought it up, and he was like, he had solved the mystery that a skunk can no longer spray with his hind feet off the ground. but the skunk tried spinning his body up to try to bite him. And he swung it down this way, and the skunk's hind feet hit his leg, which put it in that position where, my eyes, I never had my eyes burnt. I couldn't breathe. And I'll tell you, I smell like a skunk for at least a week and a half. And that was after tomato juice, folks. But we've found out that skunks can't spray if their hind feet are off the ground. But if given the chance to be able to kick off something, oh, yes, they can. So I'm going to start wrapping this up. Folks, you need to learn to laugh at yourself. You're not perfect. Learn that you're not perfect. And show other people that you understand something funny as well, even if it's at your expense. You can either take one of your two choices. You can either become upset and pissed, or you can laugh with them about some asinine thing that happened to you. So happy Sunday, folks, and we'll catch you here first thing to bright and early tomorrow morning. My son should be here shortly. It's a little after 5. We're going to hang up a steer today and then let it hang for 13, 14 days, and then everybody's going to converge, and we're going to get it all done up and into the hamburger. We do it all ourselves anyways for family. But you guys have a great, great Sunday.